Hi, friend, and welcome to this episode of Radiant Resilience. We are always looking for new guests on the podcast. I want to highlight you if you have a story of resilience that inspires others. Everyone has a story, and I believe that sharing yours can help others feel less alone. Are you ready to share your journey and inspire others? I want to hear from you. Every story has the power to impact lives and foster a supportive community. If you have a tale of overcoming adversity, personal growth, or a unique perspective on life's challenges, I would love to have you as a guest on the podcast. To become a guest, please email us directly at radientresiliencepodcast@gmail.com or click the link in the show notes to become a guest. Join us in spreading hope, strength, and inspiration one story at a time. Be brave and share your story so others feel less alone. I hope to see you soon. Before we begin, we want to acknowledge that some stories and discussions in this episode of Radiant Resilience may touch on sensitive and potentially triggering topics. These may include themes of abusive relationships, drug use and addiction, pregnancy termination, family dynamics, stalking, and intimidation. Our goal is to share real-life experiences in a respectful and empathetic manner, offering insights into the complexities of the human spirit and the journey towards resilience. However, we understand that some content might be difficult for listeners. We encourage you to prioritize your well-being and discretion when deciding to listen. Please remember this podcast is not a substitute for professional advice or support. If you find yourself needing assistance, we urge you to seek help from qualified professionals or trusted support systems. Your mental and emotional health is important to us. Thank you for your courage and for joining us in a space of understanding and compassion. Welcome back, everyone, to Radiant Resilience. I'm here with a very good friend that I just recently met, actually, within the last couple of years. I'm here with Courtney, and she was born with the sense of humor of a 14-year-old boy, a career hairstylist and salon owner whose love languages include French fries and sarcasm, has led to an arsenal of very specialized skills that have been combined and optimized for the greater good. Now the face of Good Richard Media, a company capitalizing on our common and shared weaknesses in social media and business. She does my social media for me for my business. It's fantastic. Recently divorced, raising 2 teenagers, and embarking on the next and best stage of life. Sounds like you're in a good place right now, Courtney.
Breakdowns where I question all my life decisions. There's more good than bad.
Yeah, we all have that from time to time. So we were just talking before I started recording about some of Courtney's past, and it starts with a rough relationship in her teen years. So Courtney, I'm going to let you go ahead and lead into that however you would like and share your story.
Okay. Like when we were talking before, I made like a very bold statement that I think everyone should experience an abusive relationship or a controlling relationship, just because I learned so much about myself and what I was willing to accept and not willing to accept. The unfortunate part is that a lot of women don't always find their way out.
Mm-hmm.
Just not something I would wish on anyone, but fortunately I did. But I was 16, he was older, so it already felt like scandalous because this older boy have C in me at all, and he had been expelled. He didn't even graduate high school. Like, he had winner stamped all over him in every way possible.
I'm sure your parents loved that.
Oh yeah. It was so great. But it was fun at first because you're 16 and you just got this influx of freedom, and because you're driving and you're gaining little bits of independence, being able to go spend the night or go on little road trips or something with friends or something. And
my parents said that the minute I got my driver's license, I was never home. They never saw me ever.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Yeah, I
Definitely.
was one of those that the minute I got my driver's license, I was like, peace out. I'm gonna go hang out with my friends.
Yeah, accurate. And to this day, I was just talking to someone, especially because my son right now, he is going to turn 16 in September.
Oh no.
And he is just dying to drive. And
Mm.
I've already told him there's going to be restrictions. No driving in the winter this first year, no road trips, no major road trips and stuff like that. But I was telling him still to this day, I will never do anything, though I have, but I will never do anything to jeopardize that driver's license
Mm.
because it is like, it means so much to me to be able to just hop in a car and go whenever, wherever I want
Yeah.
to. That
It's an
I don't know.
incredible first freedom because you're not quite 18 yet, but so you can't,
Yeah.
there's still a lot you can't do. Yeah, you get a lot of freedom with a car and a driver's license.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And you feel so big. And now as adults, there's no truer statement than don't rush, stay a kid, be a kid. And now you're just like, God, I should have, that's the one thing I should have listened to was like
Totally.
little.
Yeah.
But my dad, a little backstory is my dad was a long haul truck driver, so he was always gone. And
Mm.
then when he would come home, he would rule with an iron fist. So I got away with a ton from my mom, but then sometimes she would narc on me or whatever. She wouldn't handle the situations and she would tell my dad, and then he would just I would have 2.5 weeks worth of stuff that I was in trouble for. If that's not the makings of a rebel, I don't know what is. But
Oh, yeah.
but and then I was a good student. My grandpa was a teacher and he used to always test me. And then I always tested advanced and I was offered to go into the tag program and things like that. But my parents could never like skip me grades or anything. But then when you are super smart and you're super bored in class, you start making not great decisions. And
Mhm.
so right around 14 is when I started making like really questionable decisions, which leads us to this boyfriend.
Okay.
But it was super fun because like I was driving and he was older and we would just drive to the lake and hang out or I don't know, just like some of our favorite things to do was just drive all over the place or things like that. And then I tried to explain this to one of my clients that was like, I would never find myself in that situation. How did you not just recognize this and
Mm.
get out? I would never ever. And it's a whole frog in water, like that whole scenario where it's like you don't like you question little instances where maybe there's a little bit of control being exerted on his side or like just a little twist in words or something where you're like, did he just say this thing? And you don't recognize exactly what is happening until you're in way too deep. He didn't want me to wear makeup and he didn't want me to talk to his friends. If his friends wanted a hug from me because it had been a while since I'd seen them or something, then later in private, I would get thrown around or roughed up in some kind of way or things like that. And
Did that stuff
uh,
start early on in the relationship, or was that like he wooed you and it was fine for a little bit and then that stuff started happening, or was it pretty quick?
in retrospect, I have no concept of like how long things
Mm.
took.
Okay.
I would say that it was fun and games and just new love for maybe 6 months. But I
Okay.
think within that, it was like, I don't want you to blah, blah, blah. I don't like this friend. I don't want you to hang out. So it was like those little things. When it started to get physical was probably like 6 months after that.
Okay.
And then it started to get physical. He also never had a driver's, we're talking like a real piece of shit here, but didn't never had a driver's license, was always on probation or parole or like something like that where I don't know, he couldn't do certain things because then he would spend a few nights in jail or something like
Mm.
that and then heavy drug use and that was like a whole new world for me like the most I'd ever experienced was weed and alcohol but
Hmm.
then you start getting like pills and
Oh
white
man.
substances and stuff and you're just like what is this and then
Yeah.
you get all the characters that come along with it
Hmm.
and I don't know just messy stuff but what started out as me being like reprimanded and stuff in private ultimately started getting very public.
Oh.
There was an instance where, so his sister is my lifelong best friend. They don't have a great relationship, though I think they're working on it now, but
So you're
I
still friends with her?
she's
Oh.
my ride or die.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think though that this instance that I'm about to share was like the catalyst for their relationship because he's always like a shady character, hanging out with shady people, like never tell the truth and all that stuff. But I was with her and her young kids one time, and he was like blowing up my phone, and I didn't want to answer because, you just don't want to answer those kinds of things. And he found me wherever I was with her, and he yanked me out of the truck with her, like with everyone there in a parking lot, like a small parking lot in front of a small business. And I was still seat belted. So I was like half hanging out of this thing. And he started just like swinging on me.
Oh my
And
God.
yeah. And that was just like a regular Tuesday for me at that point.
So you guys were
Like,
still together at that point?
It
Yeah.
was, that was towards the end when I was trying to figure out a way to get out of the
Mm.
relationship. That's the other part that comes with it, is that you're guilty by association, and a lot of people don't trust you anymore, and they
Mm.
distance themselves, like my parents, other friends, they distance themselves from you because you might not necessarily be being dishonest, but your boyfriend is, or you go to visit someone or something, and you're thinking it's just, oh, that was a good visit. That was okay. And then he stole $20 out of somebody's purse or something. Like,
Oh, wow.
and I don't know, it just, I could never take something for face value, which is a discombobulating, like, way to exist,
Yeah.
because you just don't ever know like what the reality is. And they'll tell you one thing and somebody else tells you something else. And if you get to talk to that person at all,
Oh
I don't.
man. Did they know at that point that, okay, so he's stealing money from them, he's doing drugs, he's abusing you? Did everybody pretty much know that all of that was going on at some point?
Yeah, you try to lie. There was an instance where I was trying to leave because I had to make curfew home. I was
Mm.
trying to leave my boyfriend where he was, and I had to go home by a certain time, and he wouldn't give me my keys. That's the other thing, is
Mm.
just these dumb little things where like he wouldn't give me my keys, and I was like crying, I'm gonna get in trouble and then I won't be able to see you, and let's look at the bigger picture here and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Ultimately, he ended up throwing the keys at my face, which I still have scars on my nose, but
Oh
he
no.
ended up throwing my keys at my face. I immediately burst out with blood streaming everywhere.
Oh my
And
goodness.
then at that point, I had to go home. And then everyone knows what is going on. But I
Yeah.
remember going home, blood is half dried on my face and on my
Mhm.
shirt and stuff like that. And my dad happened to be home, which I didn't have a good relationship with my dad, but he happened to be home. My parents were home, and he called him
Mm.
and was like, what the hell? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm sitting there in the kitchen and I'm saying, like, oh, it was an accident. And like,
Mm.
how,
Making the
like, very
excuses for
cliche,
him.
like,
Hmm.
yeah, it was an accident. This is how it happened, all
Hmm.
that. And the boyfriend is on the phone, like, corroborating the story basically. And we're building upon each other and stuff like that. And so I'd be stupid not to think that people did know, but they were not going to get any confirmation from me unless they saw it themselves, like my best friend. But,
Yeah,
um,
that's such an interesting thing to me because my sister was in an abusive relationship pretty young as well. And my mom knew what was going on. And she confronted her multiple times and was like, hey, and then at one point was like, okay, cool, you're not going to admit it. He's no longer welcome in my house. So you
exactly what
are,
happens.
but he's not. And she would make all the excuses in the world for him. And I actually, this will probably air after my podcast with her. So she talks extensively about it in that episode. And yeah, it was, I mean, it was crazy. She knew at the time, and I'm sure you did too, that this wasn't right and it was wrong. And, but she didn't want to, she wasn't ready to walk away yet. So she made all the excuses for him. And later now she's, oh, yeah, that was not okay. So,
Yeah, there definitely is a period of time where it's like you love him and you want to be with
Mhm.
him. And I don't think I would go so far as to say that I could change him, but like, if
Okay.
I just behaved a certain way, then I could minimize his blowback kind of a
Oh,
thing. Like, and then too, when you're 16, 17, things like that, there's the other girls that are in your circle or whatever, and you're like, oh my gosh, if I break up, I don't know if other people do this. If I break up with him, then he's gonna get with someone that will be gut wrenching for me to see and
hmm
things like that. And not even considering like how he's going to treat her, which would be
right.
the
The
exact same
same,
as he's been treating me.
for sure.
But it just is your little ego and your little heart can't take certain things at that point.
Yeah.
Like you can barely process the most basic things, let alone these huge adult decisions that you're finding yourself in because of a couple adult decisions that you made before.
I was just talking
Um,
to a client about that the other day about how dramatic and intense everything was in high school, right? Because that was your whole world was high school and all the
yeah,
people there and all the things. And then when you get out in the real world and how big the real world is, you're like, oh, none of that stuff mattered.
yeah, but it feels enormous when you're
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah,
And I'm finding as an adult that it's a little tricky to make new friends, but
for
also
sure.
when you're in high school, that also feels exponentially
Mhm.
overwhelming just
Yeah.
because you have your friend circle and everyone knows everyone. And I think too, something to be said when you're out in the big world, like the real world, you can get distance from different situations and things like that. When you're in high school, you don't have that luxury.
So true. Yeah.
You're
Because you have to
just
go
in,
to class the next day and see those same people.
yeah,
Hmm
exactly. You can't avoid like
hmm
I don't know. And that takes a certain kind of person that I don't think high schoolers are. No high schooler is that until you get life experience.
Yeah,
So,
because that is their whole world, is
yeah,
school and high school. And that has been their whole world since they were in kindergarten, pretty much, is school. And then, yeah, I got a little bit of a taste of the real world when I went to beauty school my senior year of high school. And I was like, oh, and everybody else was still in high school doing the high school stuff and the graduation stuff and all this stuff. And I was like, God, none of this matters. Like,
yeah,
but it wasn't until I was actually thrown into it. And then I was basically going to college before everybody else. And anyways, yeah, it's
yeah,
a different world that you're living in and you don't have the maturity to have the foresight in life.
for sure. And ultimately, because I didn't have a good relationship with my dad, a really not good relationship,
Mm.
I would say borderline abusive. Like
Oh,
we
interesting.
we have a good relationship now, but he ruled with an iron fist. It was grab your ankles with the belt. It was grabbing me by the throat, tossing me around the room kind of thing. I will never tell my dad to listen to this podcast just because we have come so far
That's
from
fine.
there that I don't know. I wasn't seeking this out from my dad, but he actually apologized
Oh,
at
that's
one point.
huge.
Yeah. And then I was like, if we are going to move forward, because my dad is he would bring up shit from when I was 15, 16,
Oh,
17 years old.
he would hold
And at
on to
that
that.
point, I'm like 26, still a baby by any stretch, but no one can move forward if they're constantly being held by the mistakes and paths that they had taken prior.
For
Like,
sure.
yeah,
Especially as the teenager in early 20s. Let's be
yeah.
real.
So me and my dad had agreed that we were going to wipe the slate perfectly clean, and there would be very little, if any, bringing up anything from the past, just because he clearly couldn't get over some stuff. I clearly couldn't get over some stuff. So the only way we could move forward was by not addressing it at all. Like addressing it the one time, but
Sure.
we weren't going to thrive from regurgitating this stuff constantly.
Not dwell on it and
Yeah.
not hold on to it and hold that grudge. Both of
Yeah.
you needed to try to move past it. Yeah, that makes sense.
So for the last 10-ish years, we've had the relationship that I wish that we had always had.
Oh, I'm so glad you
Yeah.
got that though. A lot of people don't get that.
I know that's what I'm saying. I feel like whether they were conscious decisions or not, like in the moment they were conscious decisions, like we cannot talk about this anymore if we have hope of. But like I wasn't playing a long game with that. I didn't
Yeah.
know what waited for me or any of that stuff. But I feel so fortunate that the things that I've gone through and the things that I have gotten past and have all led to the most incredible places that like states of being
Yeah.
that that's partly why I wish that everyone had the taste of like abusive relationship. Or I mean, everybody always has that one parent that they don't super duper get along with, or
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
like the death
Everybody's
cycle.
closer with one or the other for sure.
Yeah. And
And I
just
don't care what people say, they have favorite children too.
I agreed.
So it goes
Agreed.
both ways.
Yeah. I definitely of my kids, there's certain things that I like to do more with one or the other for
Sure,
sure.
sure. Yeah, yeah. So quick question.
Yeah.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a minute. So do you think that because your dad was a little bit more physical with you, is that part of why you accepted the behavior of the boyfriend a little bit more, do you think?
Yeah. I think that it was just what I knew. Like
That was normal to you ish.
yeah, I'd had one serious boyfriend before this boyfriend.
Mhm.
Um, and he treated me great. He was not like the most amazing I mean, we were 16, 15, 16 at that point, so what do we know? But
Yeah.
it was very easy for me to default into this like arena just because like it was what I knew. Is this how relationships work? And I grew up with my dad like yelling, or it was very clear that he had like major anger issues, and so
Mm.
he would throw things and stuff like that. But anything like super duper angering or punishmenty stuff was never directed at my mom. It was always me.
Interesting.
Like
Did you guys ever address that issue?
I think probably in like roundabout ways. I'm not sure. He certainly didn't like lash out at me for things that I wasn't responsible for.
Okay.
But you know how, I don't know, when you're mad about something, three other things that were irritating become so much bigger because you're just in
Mm.
this rage.
Yeah.
It was more like that, where it was like, it just fueled him.
Yeah.
Um, and he had incredibly high standards too. I remember one time I got drug off of a tractor by my hair because we had drained the can of olives in the sink, but we didn't rinse the olive juice out of the sink.
Oh, yeah.
And stupid stuff like that, where it was like, you couldn't do anything right,
Yeah.
and you didn't know what the repercussions would be.
Yeah.
Why bother? Which is pretty much my life motto from then until probably now. If you can't give me parameters, I'm gonna make them my own.
Oh, yeah.
Um, my dad is still like the person that I seek like the most. I wouldn't say validation because I do what I want and I like reach for what I want, whatever, but
Yeah.
his does come with an extra little punch when he's, I'm so proud of you, or like, I knew you
Yeah.
could do it, or something like that. And so there is, for the history that we have, it's something that I think about all the time where I'm just like, how, why, who cares? My dad's proud
Mhm.
of me.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love
Yeah.
that.
So when I was 17, speaking of him being proud of me and stuff like that, I had to make a phone call to my parents because I had gotten pregnant
Mm.
by this boyfriend.
Hmm.
And that was still very much in the making excuses for him, like still
Okay.
very in the new love, not enough to, I would say, honestly, this pregnancy was like a pivotal moment for me in the relationship because it was from that point that I thought a lot about how I could get out and
Mm.
things like that. And ultimately, that led to me terminating that pregnancy just because he was abusive. Even if I did get away from him, he still had rights as a parent, and I would have to send my baby and child and preteen and whatever to be with this person. And I couldn't fathom that situation because I couldn't save them, I couldn't protect them, I couldn't do any of that.
Yeah.
And then his mother was also a real piece of work. She's passed now, RIP, probably somebody might wish, but that was another issue for me, is that if he didn't care, and even if I could get him to sign over his rights or limit his custodial any things, she would come in and I would have to
Mm.
share this baby with her.
Yeah.
And she was very manipulative and just icky people.
And you're having to think of all of this stuff at 17.
Yeah.
That is some serious shit to be thinking. As we just talked about, we're not thinking that seriously at that age typically. So good for you for thinking about those things and making that really tough decision. I'm sure that was not taken lightly and that was not an easy thing to do, 100%. But everything you're saying is so valid and so thought through, and you protected that child. You did your best.
That I have goosebumps like the way that you just said that back to me because I don't think that again you don't know that you're making like these like like you know that you're making decisions and you're trying to think through things as thoroughly and as objectively as you can. But again, you're only 17 and again, you've been alienated from everyone that you love and trust
Mm.
and I still could have conversations with my mom and stuff on the phone and things like that, but I really didn't have anybody. And
And
so,
that's part of the abuse, right? Is
mhm,
they isolate you as much as
yep,
they possibly can and control that as much as they possibly can.
yeah. I made my mom call my dad because I couldn't do it. I couldn't call
Mm.
and tell him. And
That is a
we,
very tough call to make.
yeah, we never ever talked about it, like me and my dad. Come to think of it, now that I'm like sharing it with you, I'm like, I think that he remembers because I do think that it has come up at some point, but it's like we just like skim right over it. Like, who wants to like hang out there? Because as a
Yeah.
parent, I would be devastated for my child and for my potential anythings. And
Yeah.
as someone who had to make that choice, like I remember exactly where I was. Because that's the other thing is like when you are making a decision like that at 17, you have a very small window
Yeah.
to make that decision to be resolute in that and not
Mhm.
awful about it at all.
Yeah.
And then you have to like go to the place and do the things and
Mm.
that and just the heaviness that sort of like ebbs and flows through all of that for so
Yeah.
long
Yeah.
is something else. But
And I think
um,
I'm going to go here for a minute, but I think there's a common misconception that is a decision that is made willy-nilly. And I do not believe that is ever a willy-nilly decision. I think that people have to give it a lot of thought, and I think you have to do a lot of healing from that. And it's not, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not an easy decision to make. So I don't envy anybody in that position. And I'm so sorry that you had to make that decision.
I don't wish that for anyone either. I know that for me, I try to think back on it. I think about how old that child would be and if it was a boy or if it was a girl. And I don't know if this is fucked up, but I have like little different scenarios of if it was a boy, maybe his name this time is this, and he went on to
Mm.
do this through high school or whatever it is, or if it was a girl. So I have to look back on it fondly of the memory of who this baby could have been instead of what I lost or
Mm.
the choice that I had to make because I've had friends that have had to make the same choice and I wouldn't say they're crippled by it, but it definitely weighs a lot heavier on them even now day to day.
Mm.
And I just don't want I don't want to live like that. I made a mistake, I made a decision and just is.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I get a
And
little whack.
I haven't talked to a ton of people that have had to make that decision, but every single person that I have talked to has said the same thing, that it was tough to make in the moment. And it is something I'm still trying to heal from. And that's what, again, why I said, I don't think that nobody makes that decision. Okay, I guess I shouldn't say nobody. There's probably some very few people out there that make it willy-nilly, but I do think for the most part, people are taking that very seriously.
Yeah, I'm glad that I had it as an option
Yeah.
because I don't think that I could have. Keeping the baby was not an option for me, not an
Yeah.
option at all for all the reasons that I said. I don't think that I would have had the strength and ability to see the baby to full term and then give it to someone else,
Mm.
that probably would have wrecked me. The curiosity and the ability to know that they exist and maybe seek them out. And I would have been a mess. I would have been a nightmare for whoever
Yeah.
adopted my baby. Like,
Oh,
honestly, I
yeah.
couldn't have done that either.
Yeah.
But it was from that point that I was, because you have to go through all those emotions and make that decision, right? And you didn't want to turn a baby into this situation.
Yeah.
And so like, why the hell am I in this situation?
Oh.
Um,
So
and so
that's where your
then
brain started going.
yeah, and then it was like, how do I get out of it? Because I was either always with him or he always knew where I was, or I had a very small, I had probably three people that I could hang out with
Are
without
you
him.
are you comfortable sharing the age difference between you?
Between me and the guy,
Yeah.
it was just 4 years. So I was 16 and he was 20.
Okay.
And then obviously by the time I was 20, which is when this all ended, oh, I just had like more stuff. We gotta speed up through this thing because we gotta like cliff notes this relationship because it gets so much worse.
Oh.
That is basically when I was like, how do I get out of here? But then obviously that was at 17 and I still was with him until I was 20. So that's
Yeah,
a
that's
long time.
3 more years. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had tried to break up with him before, and I would last a week and he would call incessantly and cry. And that wears on a person. Like, you're just like, okay, sure, I'll meet up with you. And then whatever happens, and then you're back in the clutches. And I had broken up with him probably more times than I could count, but I would always go back. And then the only reason that I think that I was able to finally break free for more than a week is his sister.
Mm.
Because we were best friends by that point, and I basically, if I wasn't working, I was crying at her house or I was sleeping on her couch or something like that. And it was more to prevent me from going and doing something in like a quiet moment and find my way back to him or something. And
Hmm.
but he was still like lurking outside of her house or
Mm.
following me around. And I got started making friends with like coworkers and stuff like that. And we would go decide we were going to go rent a movie. And so we would go to the movie store when they had those.
Yeah. Blockbuster back in the day.
Yep. We have the Bend has the only blockbuster that's left in the world. I don't
There
know.
still is one?
There's just one and
Oh my
it is
gosh, I
on
had no idea.
Revere.
I'm gonna have to come there and just nostalgically go through it.
You should. You should. I can't even remember the last time I was in there, but
Yeah.
me and this friend decided, and it was a boy, but we weren't anything. We were just friends, and we went to this movie place to rent a movie. And this boyfriend had followed me, and he somehow would always recruit people. Like, he had a couple other friends with him that were apparently more than willing to corner me in a parking lot
Oh, wow.
and get all up in my friend's face and stuff like that. And so that the boyfriend could pin me up against the car, and the willing participants that are of the same caliber still blow my mind.
Yeah.
It's,
That's
you
wild.
know what he's doing, you know that this is not great. I don't know. It so that would happen all the time. He obviously knew where I lived, and our neighbor had parked in front of our house one night or whatever. And because he was following me, he thought it was like a new boyfriend's car or something. So he slashed all four tires, and
Oh my
the
gosh.
police were called and all kind of, this was like, I can't, it was close to a year that this went on.
Wow.
Of just like cornering me wherever. It didn't matter who I was with. I was constantly looking over my shoulder. I don't know. But it's at that point that I was like, I have to do something with my life. I don't have any friends. My parents barely trust me. I'm lucky that they let me move back in with them.
Were you
Um,
living with him then at some point?
I lived with him for most of the
Oh,
relationship. I
wow.
had run away when I was 16. I almost got in trouble for grand theft auto because I had my parents' car and they decided to report it stolen.
Oh,
I went
shoot.
to a foster home at one point
Oh, wow.
that then I ran away from. And then the pregnancy happened like shortly after that. And then we lived together until a little bit before I was like, okay, it's almost time. It's almost time. Like, it's
Mm,
almost time to leave. And then I had convinced my parents to let me move back in with them. And yeah, so that's where I lived. And then I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I was supposed to graduate high school as a junior, but then I dropped out of high school when I ran away.
mm.
And so then I went back my senior year and I only had one class to take for one semester and I was done. That's how close I was to
Oh,
being like
wow.
graduated from school. So I went back and did that. So I graduated high school, like
Good
on
for you.
time, all that. And then after I broke up with him, so I was like 19-ish, like just 20 when I broke up. And then I decided to go to beauty school because I was like, I've always liked it. And it's something I can do something like because I didn't have the grades at that point or anything. And I'd had
Mm,
such a rocky high school career
yeah.
that, and I didn't know what I wanted to do or anything. So I went to beauty school. And then ultimately, he went, he got into a lot of trouble. He was involved in a murder.
Oh, wow.
And then he was actually put in prison for identity theft.
Oh,
And
wow.
that is the only thing that stopped him from pursuing me
Oh, wow.
because he ended up going to prison. I don't know, it was like a year to 18 months that he went to the state prison. And it was everything I needed to have the breathing space, to learn to
Yeah.
not look over my shoulder, to start to enjoy my beauty school experience.
Mm.
And like, I didn't even wear makeup because that was one of the things that I couldn't, because if I wore makeup, then I got attention and he didn't
Oh,
want me to have attention. And if I did get attention, then I was in trouble for it. And then the punishment was mine and
mm.
all of that stuff. I don't know. When I was in beauty school, I ended up having the best beauty school experience. I like set a school record and I had a job before I graduated and big moments.
You were starting to go back to you, to
Yeah.
the original
And
Courtney.
yeah. And I remember distinctly who do I want to be when I grow up? What kind of person do I want to be? And even now, I will never do anything in a relationship or a friendship or a business interaction or anything like that for someone to question my motives or if they can trust me or something just because like all of that still like weighs on me of the lack of trust and I didn't do anything. And so it is hugely important to me that I'm very upfront. If I have fallen short in some way, then I messed up. But basically it's still hugely important to me that I'm upfront and honest. And if you can't take me for face value, then ask me and I will be fully transparent just because I hated how that made me feel of
Mm.
like people not trusting me or questioning if I did something or didn't do something or
Yeah.
I don't know. That stuff just, it's like a trauma, right? Like you just,
Yeah.
I don't know. So there was somewhere else I was going to go with that
You were talking
after.
about thinking about the type of person you wanted to be when you grow up.
Oh, yeah. It just like, how did I want to feel and what kinds of friends did I want to have? And those were very conscious decisions. And like making new friends at beauty school, very quickly I weeded through the ones that I was like, oh,
Hmm.
very similar to the life I just left, or like these were
Interesting.
the ones that I wanted to like aspire to be, or but also on the flip side of that, because I feel like I had lived so much life in that short amount of years,
Mm,
I didn't have a lot in common with people because either they were
sure.
bad students and like icky people anyways, but hadn't gotten into the drugs or any
Mm,
of that stuff that, or they were like the goody two shoes where they got straight A's and like they went to church on Sundays and family dinners and the worst punishment they'd ever gotten was because they pulled their sister's hair or something. And so like
yeah.
it's really hard to find your way into a thing because I couldn't relate to anybody.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was tricky. That's even tricky now as an adult woman. Because I joke all the time and I say, I've lived 4 lives or whatever. And
Mhm.
people are always like, oh, I have too. And maybe that's
Wow.
true, but we are not the same. I can
Yeah.
guarantee we are not the same. Did you do meth? Did you babysit someone else's baby and get Ziploc baggies that were like 3 fingers deep of like crystal meth? I
Mhm.
doubt it. I don't know. And people sitting in your bathroom and ripping out their own teeth and
Oh,
stuff. People
yeah.
threatening to keep you alive on sugar water. Like if you cross the drug dealer, I don't know. Just
Oh my God. So it's like the movies. It really is.
it can be, yeah. If you were like,
Oh my
yeah,
God.
it's and then the police, our house was raided at different points. We had a felon living with us who had stolen firearms, and then we had drugs everywhere.
Oh my gosh, Courtney, all of that at such a young age.
Yeah, it was terrifying because how do you come back from that? Somehow I ended up leaving that relationship with
Mm.
all my teeth and no criminal record, even though I had probably spent more time in a police station talking to police officers and detectives and things like that because they were trying to get the different people of the whatever, all the while knowing that the boyfriend was abusive and going to punish me in some kind of way if
Oh
he
man.
caught, and knowing that these other people know how to keep people alive on sugar water. Snitches get stitches. I'm like terrified to exist. I don't know. It
What
was
a wild world to be thrown into.
it was a lot. And you couldn't tell anybody stuff because I remember telling my dad that I had just been questioned by police or whatever. And he was like, and they took me on a field trip. I had to go with them to show them where someone lived.
The police
And
did.
I was, yeah. And I was like, and that's the sugar water people. And I was like, oh my God, I don't want to be here. I want my dad. And I went home that day and I was like, I just was questioned by the police. Apparently, this boyfriend, had gotten into whatever. And my dad's, did they record you? And I was like, yes. And he was like, oh my God, because then it's legit like testimony
Mm.
and who knows what would happen. And so every direction that it could be, like, this is like, who wants to live like this? Like,
Oh my
I don't
God.
know. It
I
was a
mean,
lot.
that is a
And
lot.
that what it didn't only ever happen one time either. It just was, and like every time I'd go to sleep or something, I'd see like headlights coming into our living room window when I lived with the boyfriend. And I'd be like, oh my God, we're getting raided again. Oh my God, are they coming for him from what I had told them? And all that stuff becomes part of a police record that someone can pull and read.
Wow.
And your name will be printed there with the things that you said.
Yeah.
It was a lot.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, in a nutshell, that was my first abusive relationship. That was like the only abusive relationship that I had. But like it shapes you. It can shape you for the better, or it could shape you like, and you can just accept that this is what you're worth, or that this is how
Mm.
things work, or things like that. So like moving into, so I had the year-ish to myself, and then I had met my husband and started dating him, and he was the complete opposite. I remember one of our first fights where I started yelling and he was like, what, why are you yelling? And I
Mm.
was like, I thought that's what we did. We're disagreeing,
Yeah.
why aren't we yelling? And he was like, we don't need to yell, we can disagree but we don't need to yell. And I was like, oh, well, that's different. So he was the opposite of this other boyfriend, which felt very safe
Mm.
and very comforting. And
That's really good that you didn't fall back into similar patterns either. I feel like a lot of people in those situations end up back in those situations several times after.
yeah, no, that's one thing about me that I have noticed, especially in the last 5-ish years, whether it's business or hair or as a friend or relationships or whatever. I only need to make certain mistakes once and I will never make them again. So abusive relationship, I bristle if I even see interactions of other people in those situations because I have like radar for it.
Yeah,
I'm just like,
yeah.
nope, nope, nope,
You know what
nope.
signs to look for because you were in it.
Yeah, I will be terrified when my kids
Mm.
get to the dating stage because they're like your mom, like there isn't really anything that you can do. There are absolutely a bunch of things you can do to drive them closer together
Mhm.
because I lived that. And so just it's just like this weird purgatory to be in. I can only imagine as a parent, but it's a weird purgatory to be in it yourself. But
I'm just watching my mom with my sister, and it's so hard because you don't want to isolate them further. And then sometimes by saying he's no longer, I remember having these conversations with my mom. She's like, do I do this? But I can't look that person in the face and have them in my house for Christmas knowing what is going on. I can't treat them like
yeah,
a normal human being because of the way they're treating my kids. So it was
yeah,
a very difficult decision to try to be like, but I think she did some research and she made it very clear if you ever need anything, I am here for you. The door is open to make sure she knew that the door was not closed on her just because it was closed on him. But that's a fine line to walk.
it's huge. It's huge. It's yeah. I that's a scary, especially as a mom now thinking about it. I at least have the life experience for myself from having lived through that as like the one being abused, but I have such a fierce mama bear in me that I worry that I will be reactionary
Mm.
and maybe not think that through as I need to, but
Do
hopefully it
your
doesn't
kids
happen. And
know this story at all? They
they
do.
know an edited version of it
Sure.
because Sarah's mom died, RIP, and she was the executor of the thing, but
This is
Sarah,
the boyfriend's sister's,
yeah,
the boyfriend and the sister's mom.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So she was living in Georgia at that point. And so she was the executor, but the mom lived in my area. So I turned into a pseudo executor because I was local and she like couldn't trust her brother and stuff. I had my kids and stuff and I had to work with that boyfriend, that ex-boyfriend
Oh.
for certain things. And so my kids had met him
Oh,
and
wow.
yeah, that was the weird thing, but we were respectful. We called him Mr. First Name. And I had told my kids that was an ex-boyfriend of mine, but he wasn't very nice and he hurt me a lot in different ways. And, for my son, I wanted him to know that those certain ways, and he's a little bit older, so I told him a couple little things, and that was unacceptable as a human being, but certainly as a partner. And then my daughter, we had a different conversation and
Mhm.
things like that. But so they feel some type of way towards Mr. First Name, but they know enough that I wanted them to know enough to be uncomfortable and to, I don't know, keep their distance or that this isn't
Yeah.
just some run of the mill guy, especially because they love their Auntie Sarah so much that I
Yeah.
didn't want him to roll into that.
Mm.
So,
What was it like
uh,
for you seeing him again?
I feel like he feels like a stranger. It feels like lifetimes ago.
Mm.
So I know who he is, who he was to me, the things we experienced, the good and the bad, but I feel very detached from it. He's just her brother
Mhm.
now to me,
Do you still see him from time to time or not really?
not on purpose.
Yeah, sure.
We went 14 years without seeing each other while living in the same town.
Wow.
Yeah. And the part of that is from me and his sister because she would always tell me his last known whereabouts, basically.
Hmm.
And I would steer clear of certain places or
Okay.
something just for my own comfort.
Hmm.
And then after a while, I just didn't care. I didn't know where he lived, or I was going to go wherever I wanted to because I had evolved into that level of strength and comfort.
Yeah.
And even now, that took probably 6 months or so that I had to communicate with him or share different things or whatever, or be in the same vicinity as him. And I don't know, it just was fine.
Yeah.
Sarah, my friend, is you have got to be the only person that will go head first into the most uncomfortable situations.
Is it triggering at all? Do you feel any of those emotions from back then coming up? It's been so long now, but maybe the first couple times you saw him, did you notice any of that?
I think that I think for me, I always just wonder about what could have been, or especially when thinking about that baby, because he never went on to have any kids, which is great. So great. But I don't know if things had been different, or
Mm.
because we had a lot of fun together and stuff. But also, I wouldn't trust those memories either, because I'm a 40-year-old woman looking back on something when I was 16.
Yeah.
I also like different foods back then too that I don't like now. So like
Yeah.
this logic can't be trusted.
Oh,
Yeah. But I don't know. He feels very strangery to me. So
interesting.
I don't know.
What I want to move into the second piece that we were going to start talking about, but before we close off this portion of your life, not close it off,
Yeah.
not a very good way to
We can shut it down. We
phrase
can
that.
block Pandora's
I
box.
just like what helped you, do you think, okay, for somebody who's listening who may be in a similar situation or has been, what advice would you give somebody like that? And then what helped you heal afterwards and helped you? Was there anything specific that helped you heal from this?
So this is going to be like probably really shitty, because I don't know what advice that I would give necessarily, because it's just so hard to reach someone in this
Mm,
situation. It's so hard to, it's, you know, when people give you pep talks, it's all going to be okay and you're doing the best you can and all that stuff. And it's just placating and almost like condescending. It has like a condescending air to it, or maybe that's just me. I don't
yeah.
know. But it's so great for someone to be like, I'm there for you, but you're
Yeah.
not actually, not in this situation, not with the
Yeah.
level of, not with the potential risk of bodily harm that could come to yourself by in, immersing yourself into trying to extract someone from an abusive relationship. That is risky business, and not everyone is willing to put their pudding where their words are.
Yeah.
And so I can see why someone would be real hesitant about even remotely trying to escape a situation like
Mm,
this. But if I were to say anything, it's just that anything is better than what you're dealing with now. If it's your parents that you need to lean into or something, like your parents are like the ride or dies for real, right? You might not have the best relationship, but maybe they always have a room for you, which can sometimes be enough. Or I don't know. And for me, I to this day love being underestimated. It fuels me like no other.
mm.
And when I left that boyfriend, he was like, oh, you'll never be anything. No one will ever love you. You're just a
Oh
piece of
gosh.
shit. Like all this stuff. And double dog dare me, because that's the only thing we're missing now. And I just was fueled by being better and achieving anything. And I don't know, just I guess maybe that's also what like helped me heal through stuff, is that like the smallest accomplishment. I could go to the grocery store by myself, or I didn't look over my shoulder when I got into my car, or, and
Did you
like
recognize those in the moment as wins or not until afterward?
eventually. And it helped that he had then been removed from society.
Right.
But it's like that flinching when someone's swinging at you thing, that you get your keys and you're ready to go out to your car. And I wouldn't go out to my car after dark and things like, especially if I was alone. And so being eventually able to go out to my car without looking all over the place before leaving the threshold of the
Mm,
doorway, those were big.
yeah.
And eventually I recognized them like, oh my gosh, I did it. And like I got in the
Yeah.
car and didn't immediately lock the doors, or I could sit there for a second and put my head down and send a text message or something without, because I would never do that.
Oh,
Like I would
wow.
get into my car, lock the doors, and go. So I don't know. And I just wanted, so back to the who did I want to be when I grew up? I wanted to be a self-sufficient, strong woman who could handle her own no matter what,
Mm,
which ultimately I think led partially to the demise of my marriage, but
mm,
that's a different thing. But every day was a new day. Every day I could wake up and not look over my shoulder.
mm.
And I don't know, we don't pump our own gas here, but I can't think of a better example. So I could pump my own gas. So even if that day was just those two things, that was still forward
Mm,
progress, like forward momentum. And that is what drove me to be better. And
yeah.
if I was being better and glowing up or whatever it was, then I was winning and he was not.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that answered your question, but
It sounds like you had a pretty solid self-worth image to somehow pull you out of that. Not every woman can say that either.
no, I have joked about that I wish that I could teach, whether it's public speaking or whatever. I wish that I could teach confidence because it's literally something that I faked my way through until it became authentic.
Have you read, I just started reading Jamie Kern Lima, the girl who started It Cosmetics. You were
Mhm.
at Thriver Society Live when she
Yeah.
spoke. Yeah. I started reading her book, Worthy. You should read it because she compares self-confidence with self-worth and how different they are, and that you can have self-confidence without self-worth, and you have to realize your self-worth in the end. I'm the very early stages of reading it, but
Yeah.
so I think you would really like that book. But it sounds to me like maybe not in the midst of your relationship with this person, you obviously didn't have the self-worth, otherwise you would have maybe left a little bit sooner. But
Mhm.
then when you did get out, you had that basis there, so you were able to build on that. Maybe does that sound right?
Yeah, for sure. Because that's exactly right. I wouldn't have stayed if I had the confidence of I can do better or I deserve
Right.
more or whatever. But after that, when the world was literally my oyster and I could go any direction I wanted to, how was I going to do that as someone who was ducking and scared of everything? So I had to get to a place where I would go headfirst into something or I would go to something alone because that was the only choice that I had in order to experience that thing, whatever it was, whether it was eating alone or going to a concert alone or something. I had to be comfortable in my own skin. But that took years of faking it until I made it, basically. And now I have more confidence than the average bear should have because I
I
just
love your
stocked it up.
confidence. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's no reason, this is going to sound really self-deprecating and I don't mean it that way, but there's no reason for me to have the amount of confidence that I have because I'm just like an average woman doing average things that isn't that different than other people, but I'm doing it with a little spunk and a whole lot of sass, and this is just is what it is.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I love that because I think people who are in abusive relationships really struggle coming out of that, finding their self-confidence and worth again.
Yeah, it's huge, but
Because you've been beaten down and told you're not worth anything for so long. How do you change that in your brain to
yeah.
tell yourself that was not true and that person was full of shit? And
You literally have to lie to yourself. Like you've already been lying to yourself for years. He doesn't love you. He doesn't see a future with you. Like whatever, I don't even know. It's been so long, but all of those are lies too. But you tell yourself like, oh, he loves me. I'm the only one for him. He only wants to be with me. He only does this because those are all lies. So why don't you tell yourself some beautiful lies? Like you are beautiful. You can do so much better. You
mm,
are so smart. I don't know. Like that lipstick shade looks gorgeous on you. Buy
mm,
two tubes. Like it's the dumbest stuff, but it's the compound effect.
yeah.
You don't want to pay compound interest, but like you can compound the effect of these small little things. I've struggled with my weight all through my life, but I'm feeling particularly thin these days. And so I put on some of my skinny pants and they look pretty good. And so I've been wearing the shit out of them because like
For you.
I just want to. It's like
Yeah.
I just want to. And it
Mm,
everything helps. Like
yeah.
I, I don't know. Do whatever makes you feel good, feel better,
That's great.
even if it's just for 5 minutes.
That's really good.
Every minute counts, right? We say that for all
Yeah.
the things like, but I don't know. If it makes you feel good for 90 seconds, isn't it
Yeah.
worth doing?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And life is too short. Life is too short to live miserable lives, to
Yeah.
put it lightly.
Yeah.
um, yeah, it's too short. So every minute counts. You're right. I love that. If it makes you feel good, even for 5 minutes, do it.
Hmm.
Even for 60 seconds, do
Yeah.
it.
Like, I don't know. I would much prefer to feel good. My dad has always had anger issues and loved to be grumpy and stuff. And
Mhm.
I feel so much, I have so much more energy, like being happy. And I don't want to be fake happy, which
For
I would say I
sure.
generally am not. But sometimes you have to fake that too. Like I'm going through a divorce. And so not all the days are good days, but
Well,
like,
and are you still doing hair behind the chair?
just one day a week. Yeah. 2 to 3 days a month basically is what it boils out to. But
Yeah, because I was just thinking I've had really hard days before, and then having to go into the salon and pretend like that stuff's not happening and put a smile on your face and give those clients the experience they deserve because they're
yeah.
paying you for that.
Yeah.
But that can be one of the hardest things some days when you're going through hard shit is to just
Yeah.
pretend like you're happy.
But
So,
then on the flip side of that, to go back to the thing that we were just talking about, of where do what feels good, like even just for 60 seconds, if you need to cry all the way home while listening to Papa Roach or something, then that is also what you do. Like,
yes. Oh, I've had my cries on the way home many
yeah,
times. Maybe not to Papa Roach, but
I,
yeah.
I love, or Alice in Chains is one of my favorites. And I
Oh,
just go
that's
like,
so
"Rah."
fun. Oh.
Like,
Angry music.
yeah. Or you do the angry music and then you segue into like girl power kind of music or power ballads or something, then everything's gonna be okay.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's okay for just one day.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
everything has value, right? Whether it's a minute or one day or whatever. And I am a big believer in conscious decisions. I cannot stand when people are like, oh, I grew up like this. That's why my life is like this. I don't buy
Mm,
that bullshit. But I had this abusive relationship. It very well could have like cycled into relationships like
yeah.
this or whatever. And I could be teaching that to my kids or whatever. But I don't know. Yesterday, I snapped at someone who worked at Starbucks because I was irritated about how something was served or whatever. And I felt really bad. But then today I went to Starbucks and I was so much nice. Like every day is different. Yes, I recognized that I was an asshole yesterday. And then
Well,
today I
we're
went
all gonna
back.
have those days. That's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
But today I went back, didn't see the same person, but like I went back and I was going to make it a good day. So I just said thank you and went along with whatever. And that seems so stupid.
Mm,
I guess it's just being aware of how I behaved yesterday and I didn't like it. It didn't feel good. I clearly sat with it because it was like
mhm.
bugging me.
Yeah.
And then today was a new day.
Mm.
I feel every single day you can make moves to whatever person you want to be or to break to the person that you've always tried to be or whatever. And
It's a
I don't know.
constant work in progress, right? We're always working on ourselves. We're always trying to be better. And it's gonna be a lifelong thing. It just is,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But yeah, if you learn from it and you make better choices, and you're right, every day is a new day.
Yeah. And I don't think that you need like a gajillion self-help books. They all say the same fucking thing. But I don't think you need a gajillion self-help books. I don't think that you need to kick your own ass about stuff.
I'm very good at that.
Same. We get in these little death cycles or whatever, but
I'll share a quick story. I
yeah.
recently I went to the grocery store and I got stuck talking to the people trying to sell charities, like monthly subscriptions to charities. And I totally signed up for it because every time I get stopped by one of those people, I sign up for it. I beat
Suckers.
myself up for that for 2 days because,
Oh,
and all I did was run to the grocery store between clients. So then I had to go back to the salon. I was so mad at myself. While my client was processing, I called and canceled the subscription. So I fixed it. Like it was fine.
yeah.
I literally was so mad at myself for 2 days. And I'm like, I have got to get over this because yeah, it was stupid. Learn from it, I canceled the subscription. It wasn't even that much money, but it was a whole thing. And I still to this day, I'm very good
Do
at
you want to know one of my favorite questions that I ask myself?
Yes.
It is so dumb. Why am I like this? Because I will do something and I'll be like, oh my God, why am I like this? Because I'll either embarrass myself, which it's not easy to embarrass me, but I'll embarrass myself, or I'll do something like that where it's I can't get out of doing this thing because it hits me in the heart guts or whatever. And I just, why am I like this? And then I have to let you get 5 minutes to like tantrum or wallow or whatever it is. And then you have to move on.
Yeah.
That's just it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm certainly not a life guru or a Brené Brown or anything like that, but I think that we tend to overthink everything and we put a lot of weight and validation into how we grew up or all those things. And I really just think if you just take, we keep saying it, so I don't want it to be like, dang, but like if you take every minute or every day or whatever for what it is, you only have that 24 hours to do, or the 16 hours, 18 hours that you're awake or whatever. You do the best that you can with what you have. You don't have to spend 3 hours a day reading a book to be a better human. It's instinctual. You're either a good human or you aren't. And if you aren't, then you can make a conscious decision to be a little better. That's it.
Yeah.
2 + 2 is 5 or 4. See, I'm trying to make up my own stuff.
You're doing great.
According to me, 2 + 2 is 5 because I make up my own rules.
Yeah, exactly. Own that.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing this part of your story. I think we are going to break Courtney into 2 parts.
A little long-winded.
No, but this was so good. But we want to hear the rest of your story too. Thank you so much for sharing this. I know how hard this must have been to talk about and revisit. And I don't take it lightly that you were vulnerable and shared all of that. And I just really hope that it helps somebody else that may or may not be going through that, or bring some compassion to somebody who knows somebody that went through it or whatever. So much for being on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, everybody, we will talk to you next time and you'll get the rest of Courtney's story. Thank you so much for tuning into today's episode. If you enjoyed our conversation and found value in the stories shared, please consider following us on your preferred podcast platform. Your ratings and reviews make a huge difference. They help us reach more listeners and continue bringing you engaging, insightful content. We appreciate your support and would love to hear your thoughts and feedback. Until next time, keep listening, growing, and sharing.